Hi, I'm Paul Edwards. I'm a self-published horror author, and first and foremost, a monster kid. Today I'm reading Modern Monsters magazine, issue number 2, from 1966. I thought some of you might enjoy flipping through this vintage magazine with me. Together, let's see what kinds of monster kid goodness is in here. Modern Monsters magazine, issue number 2, from June 1966, prominently features a suspiciously bat signal-like shape, even though the cover story is not about the Batman TV series, it's about Bela Lugosi as Dracula. And they tell you right here, Count Dracula. But it being 1966, the Adam West Batman TV series was all the rage. Batmania was going on. And so it's no surprise that they would put a bat shape that looks an awful lot like the Batman logo on their cover. And if you think it might have been just a coincidence, take a look at the inside cover. Oh, what do you know? All right, so what are we going to get in this issue? Oh, Nick Adams. AIP. You know, when I was a kid, I thought the biggest movie company in the world was American International Pictures. Because half the time when I watched Creature Double Feature on a Saturday afternoon, the movies were from American International Pictures. And I'm like, wow, look at all these movies this company put out. Well, you know, that was almost all that they put out. We do get Batman in this issue, though. And James Bond. You get a couple of non-horror properties. But the magazine doesn't promise horror, it promises monsters. There could be monsters in other kinds of fiction, like science fiction. But there's definitely no monsters in James Bond. Did they have a monster in the Batman TV series? I'll have to think about that. This is Modern Monsters interviews Nick Adams. Nick Adams had the starring role in this film, Die Monster Die, which had just recently come out. This was a film very loosely, based on H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space. But they took almost all of the Lovecraftian elements out of the story and just left basically the story outline, and they cast Boris Karloff as Naum Whitley and Nick Adams as a young man who doesn't really feature in this written story, but who is investigating what's going on at the Whitley Manor. Of course, in the book, it was a farmhouse, not a huge Gothic mansion. They changed a whole lot, and it certainly wasn't in England. But anyway, Die Monster Die did star Nick Adams. For real monster buffs, he's probably remembered best as having played astronaut Glenn in Monster Zero. And he also played the lead scientist in Frankenstein Conquers the World, which was also 1965. In fact, here he is, getting ready to give what for to the Frankenstein monster. He's arriving in Japan to film Frankenstein Conquers the World. Oh, wow. Okay, American International Pictures, #1 in horror movies. They really were for a while. That doesn't mean that they had the best horror movies, but in terms of output, they I'm sure, held the crown for a number of years. They put out a lot of those drive-in horror films, especially of the 1950s and the first half of the 1960s. No, Attack of the Crab Monsters. And they weren't all bottom-of-the-barrel productions. AIP did get some big-name actors, notably Vincent Price and Lon Chaney Sr. This must be from the set of The Haunted Palace. Yeah. It's funny because The Haunted Palace, like Die Monster Die, is a movie based loosely on an H.P. Lovecraft story. In this case, the story was the case of Charles Dexter Ward, where a young man becomes fascinated with an ancient ancestor of his who had been an evil wizard, and he studies his wicked ancestor's past and ends up reviving him in the present day. In this movie version, instead of resurrecting the ancestor in a separate body who then replaces him, they do it a little more simply than that, and the young man is just possessed by the spirit of his evil ancestor. And also the young man is now a middle-aged man because they wanted Vincent Price in the role, which in the story was a college-age youth. Oh, this is from the movie Black Sabbath. In fact, it's from the most terrifying chapter in the movie Black Sabbath. The movie was an anthology movie. House of Usher, of course. The first of the Roger Corman movies that Vincent Price did, the Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. Oh my gosh. Comedy of Terrors. Oh, this is from the 1963 version of The Raven. This is a good family-friendly Halloween movie. It's basically about a good magician having a war against an evil magician. And it's a Richard Matheson script that has equal parts laughs and, kid-level thrills. I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. Okay, so 1966, James Bond was big. I'm not sure how it wound up in a magazine called Modern Monsters, because there were no monsters in James Bond. The closest you could get to a monster would have been Jaws, played by Richard Kiel. But a proper monster? No, never. Bullets, blood, blondes, buffoons, bravery, and Bond. Oh, try saying that fast. Dr. No. Here, since they happen to be showing Dr. No, I'm going to give you a piece of trivia. In the movie Dr. No, when James Bond is in the villain's lair and he's walking through the lair, he stops and looks at a painting that's on display. And it doesn't make any sense to us what he's doing, why he stops and gives this painting a second look. That was a famous painting that had been stolen, and at the time the movie came out, that painting was missing. It was on the black market somewhere. And so it was funny that Dr. No had it in his lair. They wound up recovering the painting soon afterwards, though. And so only people who saw the movie in the theater when it first came out would have got that joke. So there, now you know. From Russia with Love is really one of my favorite Bond movies. I know, everybody thinks Goldfinger is the best one. I know, and I understand that completely. All right, so we are getting an article on Batman. So maybe the cover wasn't really deceptive. Maybe they did mean to tell us that Batman was in here, even though they didn't mention Batman anywhere among the titles here. All right, fair enough. I love how everything in the Batcave is labeled with big signs, like they're going to forget what it is. Bat voice analyzer or whatever. This set really was great, though, the Batcave set. Okay. Before the 1960s Batman TV series that almost everybody knows, there were 2 movie serials back in the 1940s of Batman. And this is how Batman and Robin looked back then. A 100 times more thrilling on the screen. Wow. Batman poster. All right. Well, we'll have to check that out. Yep, there's J. Carrol Naish playing the main villain in, I believe it was the second Batman movie serial. Nice. This is telling us about the original novel, Dracula, by Bram Stoker, and how it's been adapted. This was the single biggest misstep they ever took in the Universal Studios films. Miscasting Lon Chaney Jr. as Dracula. I'm not anti-Lon Chaney at all. He just had no place playing Dracula. It was just not the right fit for him. They could have got John Carradine, who later played Dracula, in worse movies, but did a better job portraying Dracula. They should have got him. Okay, nowadays, if they make a movie, they just dub it into different languages to release it in different countries. In the old days, they used to approach movies differently for international markets. They would film one set of scenes with English-speaking actors and then use the same sets to film the scene again with Spanish-speaking actors. So you would have a completely different cast for the foreign release of the same movie, even though it followed the same script. So if you've ever heard of the Spanish version of Dracula, the 1931 Dracula, it's not just Bela Lugosi being dubbed into Spanish. It's a different cast using the same sets as the 1931 Dracula that we all know, but basically trying to one-up the American production at every turn. So this is from the Spanish version of Dracula. Wow. Christopher Lee in Horror of Dracula, the first of the Hammer Studios Dracula films. Christopher Lee didn't want to come back for the first sequel. So they kept Peter Cushing as Professor Van Helsing and had him go up against a different boss vampire. That was Brides of Dracula. Some fan wrote in with their artwork and got it published in the magazine. That's pretty good. Memories of Tomorrow. Memories of Tomorrow. Or as they said on Mystery Science Theater, oh, it's the old future. I love it when you're watching a retro science fiction movie and they just throw out a year like, well, ever since man built his first city on the moon in the year 1986. You're like, wait, what? I think that these things work a lot better if they just leave years out of it completely. Never say what year the movie is supposed to be. Never refer to a specific year that something happened. You can say something happened 10 years ago, but never say it happened in, 1986, because then you're going to get, your movie's going to get dated much faster than you realize. The Bride of Frankenstein. Oh yeah. I really liked the graveyard set in this film. You have to admit, The Bride was pretty freaky. The way that Elsa Lanchester portrayed her, looking back and forth like a nervous bird, jerking her head this way and then that, it was just very otherworldly. Huh. Yeah. In recent years, I've been getting more into movie serials, the ones done by like Columbia and Republic and Universal. So here we've got The Lost Planet, Zombies of the Stratosphere, The Undersea Kingdom. I never like when they show this picture. So Todd Browning's Freaks, this is the shock ending scene of the movie, but they're giving it away. If you've never seen the film, they're blowing it for you in the magazine. But they circulate this image like crazy now, so I'm sure you've already had it spoiled for you anyway. Phantom of the Opera. The classics live again. That's what I say. Lon Chaney Jr.'s signature role, the Wolfman. I love this scene where Larry is trying to pick up Gwen in the antique shop. It's a timeless scene of a young man trying to pick up a young woman. It's really funny. But our poor friend Jenny doesn't get to see how that turns out, because Bela reads her fortune and then causes her calamitous fortune to come true. Oh, this is a pretty good picture spread here. Wow. This is a publicity image, of course. This isn't actually shown in the movie. I like that one. Okay. Shock Theater. This is how they make monster kids. Starting in 1957, there was a package of pre-1948 horror movies that was distributed to TV stations to show late at night on a program called Shock Theater. This introduced a whole new generation of kids to the classic monsters. Dracula, the Invisible Man, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Mummy, the Phantom of the Opera. And this is what created what's called the first wave of monster kids from the late 1950s through to about 1965 or 66. Shock Theater was responsible for that. Then lots of other UHF stations around the country developed their own versions of Shock Theater. In my TV market, it was Creature Double Feature in Boston. And that led to the second wave of monster kids, which were the people who were between 8 and 18 during the 1970s, which was my group. So Shock Theater is really where a whole bunch of monster fandom comes from. There was Shock Theater, and then Shock Theater was very popular, so they released a second package with even more movies called Son of Shock. So even to this day, you know, sometimes you'll see like a trope in movies and TV shows that someone is staying up late at night and watching a scary movie in the dead of night. That image all comes from shock theater. This is a continuation of a short story from the last issue and is continued in the next issue. Really? Try publishing this today. Go ahead, try. I'm not even going to say anything. This speaks for itself. Yeah. The official Herman Munster headpiece. Okay, Batman poster. Okay, here's the thing. I'm all for a Batman poster, but why would you want a poster of Batman getting slugged? Wouldn't you want a picture of Batman slugging the Joker or something? Well, why would you want to see the hero losing in poster form? That's no good. Oh. Nice. I'll have to look for this on Internet Archive. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. Christopher Lee reading Dracula. That's got to be available now. I'll have to track that down. I have a lot less interest in tracking down a professional bald cap. Not sure what you would need that for. Oh, you can get a vampire bat and a scary, hairy tarantula. Wow. I had one of these rubber tarantulas, and over the course of time, one by one, the legs would break off. So it became less and less impressive. All right, 1966 monster calendar. But we're already into 1966. Shouldn't they be selling us a 1967 monster calendar? Huh, the famous and original monster collection. What could this be? Monsters of yesterday, monsters of today, monsters of the future. 1,500 photos, poster, and lobbies. Lobby cards, that means. Huh. I don't know. Oh, I like that, though. That looks like, is that the same as this? Yep, sure is. Nice. If you enjoy vintage horror and classic monsters, you would love my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. I'm self-published on Amazon. I've written a series of novels that all take place in a haunted forest, Mourner's Woods. And each novel brings a completely new cast of characters into this forbidden wilderness where they face threats such as ghosts and monsters. But invariably, the worst threat that any character faces is the friends who hiked here with them. My books recapture the vibe and feel of 20th century B movies. I'm self-published on Amazon. My books, again, are the Mourner's Woods books. My name is Paul Edwards. Thanks for spending some time with me looking through Modern Monsters magazine. I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.